Hi everyone and welcome to Book Boop. My name is Rachel and today I'm going to talk about my top books of 2020. First of all, if you happen to hear any smacking or chewing sounds or licking sounds, that is my dog. I apologize about that. He just wants to hang out with me while I film today and he constantly licks his paws. So I'm sorry if you can hear it right now or hear it during any time in this video. I have 12 books to share with you today. I had a little bit of trouble coming up with this list, to be honest. Not that I didn't have some favorite books from 2020, but I had trouble even thinking about trying to put them in any kind of order. So I'm just going to tell you about my favorite books. They're not in a specific order. I'm not counting down to like my favorite or anything like that. These are just my favorites of 2020. So some of these books I am fortunate to own. So a good chunk of them I'm going to be able to hold up that way. A few others I'm going to be just showing you the picture of the cover just for you to be able to see what they look like. Also, if you want to read my sweatshirt, it says staying in is the new going out, because it is. And I love this sweatshirt. I practically live in it. I got it on clearance and I love it so much. And it's massive and it makes me happy. All right, let's go ahead and jump in. The very first book I'm going to talk about is one that I kind of forgot that I read. And it's The Secret of Nightingale Wood by Lucy Strange. This is a middle grade, I would say, magical realism and hard-hitting book. I absolutely adored it. We are following this little girl in the 1800s who is living with her mother and a maid. Her father is away in the city working, and I believe her mother has recently lost a baby. Because of this, her mother is suffering from depression, obviously from losing the baby, and she's having a really hard time. And unfortunately, during this time period, the way that a lot of times doctors would prescribe dealing with depression and feelings of that, or even postpartum depression, is isolation, which that's probably the worst thing you could possibly do, but that's what they did back then. And so her mother is constantly being isolated in her room. She's told to not go see her mother or to spend time with her. And this little girl is seeing her mother get worse and worse. The doctor is not only isolating her, but medicating her as well quite heavily. And the little girl is thinking, this is not helping my mom. This is making her worse. And she keeps trying to tell people that. She keeps trying to get a hold of her father to tell him that. But of course, the doctor and the father are really much the only adults corresponding back and forth about her mother's health. So it's this whole thing about this little girl, and because she's young, I think she's like 10, because she's young, nobody believes her, and like, oh, you're just a little girl, you don't know what you're talking about. And she's like, no, this is not helping my mom, this is making her worse, and things start to escalate. It's a really beautiful story. It's heartwarming, it's heartbreaking, and I really loved it. So I highly recommend this book if you haven't heard of it before, and I just thought it was a really fantastic read, and I really liked it a lot. Okay, so what's my next book here that I do not own? Okay, this one will probably not be a surprise for anybody. I feel like this is going to be on like everybody's top books of 2020 because it feels like everybody loves it. And that is The House of the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. I'm going to give you extremely brief synopsis about this one. This one is about this guy named Linus Baker, and he works for a company that he's I'm blanking out, I'm sorry. He works for a company that, for magical youth, there are these orphanages that have magical youth, kids that have special abilities. So he's a caseworker. That's what I was trying to think of. He's a caseworker and goes to these different orphanages to check to make sure the kids are being well taken care of, that the orphanages are being run well. And so one day he's asked to go and basically stay for a month at this orphanage that is the House of the Cerulean Sea. And half the reason he's going is not only to make sure that these kids are being well taken care of, but also apparently the children that are at this particular orphanage are actually considered to be dangerous to the world and the society as a whole. So he has to go and see, one, to see that the kids are taken care of well, but two, if they really are actually as dangerous as they are thinking they are. This is an unbelievably heartwarming story. It's about discovering love and family and how we don't have to be the way people expect us to be. A lot of these kids are seen as monsters, and originally before they go to this orphanage, they felt like they had to act like the monsters people thought they were because that's how people viewed them. But they learned that they get to be who they want to be. And just because other people see them as monsters doesn't mean that they are. So it is an adult book, but it is written in a middle grade style. It is lovely. It is wonderful. I enjoyed it so much. I would love to read more about these kids because I adore them. I'm not going to go too much into what the kids are like because I don't want to spoil anything, but it's so good. Highly recommend. So much fun. So that one was a beautiful read. One of my favorites, definitely. Okay, I've got two more here that I do not own. This next one is a thriller. I got into some thrillers in 2020, which was really, really fun, and I'm wanting to continue this year in 2021, and that is Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. This was Riley Sager's 2020 release. I absolutely adored this book because this is a haunted house thriller, which is everything I could ever want. If it's spooky and ghosty, Mama gonna read it. So in this story, we kind of follow dual timelines in a way. So we're following this woman. Her father has recently passed away and he has left her a house. Now this house has some history to it. Her father ended up becoming a best-selling author because he wrote about the time that her and her parents all lived in this house, but they only lived there for a month. They only my tablet's dying. They only lived there for a month because while they were there, some terrifying things happened. Apparently the house is crazy haunted, and they ran out of the house and said they're never going back. The father wrote a book about it, ended up becoming a bestseller. Fast forward then, her father's passed away. He's left her the house. She didn't even know her father still owned it. At this point, she doesn't remember any of the stuff that happened while she was there. She was really young. She doesn't really think that any of that stuff actually happened. She thinks her daddy lied about it. And so she goes to this house to, one, flip the house. She wants to see if she can fix it up, flip it, and sell it. And also to see if she can do some investigating and see if anything her father wrote about was real. So it jumps back and forth between her timeline of the present, of going to this house and investigating. And there are other sections we actually get to read the book. There are sections of the book and their time there. So anyways, let's go ahead and move on. But I really enjoyed this. This was such a fun book. And this is one of the few thrillers I've read that I feel like has great rereadability. I feel like there's so many things that would be fun to read again with this one. So I'm hoping to hopefully get this one on my shelf at some point because I thought it was so much fun. Okay. The last one here for my tablet, and I'll try to get to this quickly before my tablet dies, is Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. Brandon Sanderson is a BookTube darling author. Everybody seems to love him. This is probably my favorite thing I've read by him so far. So this is a YA sci-fi. We are following this girl, and all she's wanted to do is to become a fighter pilot. This is kind of like set in the future. Mankind, or at least I don't know if the entirety of mankind is on this planet, but they have gone to this planet and they've had to live underground because there is an alien species that keeps attacking people whenever they come above ground. So in order to protect everyone that's below ground, it's kind of the highest honor to become a fighter pilot. And so she really, really wants to become a fighter pilot, but everything seems to be against her because her father was actually a legendary fighter pilot, but he's legendary for a bad thing. He actually ended up fleeing in fear during this huge epic battle that is in their history books. And because of that, people think that she's like him and that she's a coward. And that's kind of like the biggest no-no in this society is you have to be brave to, honestly, to the point of idiocy. But anyways, there's a whole lot more to it than that. It's witty, it's funny, it's fast-paced, it's action-packed. I love the descriptions of the battles and everything like that, and the flight school. She ends up getting into flight school, and it's a lot of fun, and I enjoyed it a lot. There's a lot of hard-hitting moments, there's a lot of funny moments, there's just so much in this story. So if you are interested, one, in Brandon Sanderson, and or maybe you're interested in getting into some sci-fi, I highly recommend this one, because I feel like this one's easy to get into, and it's a really fun series. There are 2 books out so far. There's going to be a 3rd one at least. I think it might be just a trilogy, but I've only read the first one so far and I absolutely loved it. So I highly recommend. Okay, now let's jump to the ones I actually physically own so my tablet can die in peace. So let's go ahead and jump into some of my physically owned ones that were my favorites from 2020. First one is one I feel like I've mentioned so many times on my channel, but I absolutely adore it and I'm so excited to finally own it. And that is The Bone Houses by Emily Lloyd-Jones. I can't say her name apparently. I'm very tongue-tied today. If you can't tell, I'm sorry. This book, I love it. So it is a mashup of fantasy and paranormal and horror, which is like all my favorite genres mushed into one thing. So this is a YA book. We're following this girl who lives in a small village with her family. Her father, before he passed away, was kind of the undertaker of this village. He was the one that took care of the graveyard and would dig the graves. Now, there's something unique about the graveyard in this village. The dead don't always stay dead. Some of the people that they bury would actually come back out of the grave and wander around. Nothing malicious about it. Think like zombie-ish, but they're not like trying to eat your flesh or anything. They're not dangerous. They just get out and wander around. And that's unusual, obviously, but it hadn't really been too much of a problem, except for the fact now there are some dead that are coming out and starting to become violent. And this girl thinks it has something to do with the forest that surrounds this village. And so she ends up going on a quest to figure out why these bone houses, which is what they call the resurrected dead that kind of come out and wander around, why they're becoming violent, why there seem to be more of them, why some of them are coming out of the forest to attack the villagers. It's so much fun. I loved it. I loved the main character in this book. She don't need no man. She's really hardcore and she's funny. But she's like she loves her family so much and she wants to protect the people that she loves. And it's so good. The romance in this is a slow burn. It's believable to me. I loved everything about this book. There's nothing that I didn't like. It's so good. So if you haven't had a chance to read it, I highly recommend. And I promise it's not like super, super scary. When I say horror, think like some zombie vibes, but it's not like real bad. So don't be deterred by me saying horror. It's just a little creepy, but I love it so much. All right, let's do another thriller. That is Lock Every Door by Riley Sager. Can you tell I'm liking Riley Sager? I've read 2 Riley Sager books in 2020 and I'm hoping to read some more because so good. This one was fun. This was my first Riley Sager that I read, and actually my first thriller that I read for the year, and it kind of kicked me off on wanting to read more of them. So let's see if I can explain this one correctly. We are following this girl, and I'm sorry I always say following this girl or this guy because I'm horrible at remembering character names, like really bad. So I could not tell you for the life of me what any of the character names are. I don't remember. I'm sorry. So I apologize. I keep saying we're following this girl because that's all I can tell you. All right. So we were following this girl who is down on her luck. She's just been dumped by her boyfriend. She lived with her boyfriend, but now she's like crashing on her best friend's couch. She also just lost her job as well. She was laid off. And so she's down on her luck and just needing to find a way to make some money and just is feeling like life just sucks right now until she sees an ad in the paper about being an apartment sitter in this really fancy high-rise building. She lives in New York, and it's this really fancy building where basically the rich and famous are the people that stay in this apartment building. And so it's a place that you can't normally get into, but you see this advertisement to go and apartment sit. So she's like, okay, that's a really, really easy job, an easy way to make money for right now until I can figure things out. And that way I'm not crashing on my friend's couch anymore. So she goes and interviews for the job and finds out that she's going to be paid a very handsome fee or getting paid a lot of money to apartment sit. There are a few strange rules, which she's like, okay, they're rich and famous people, so I guess they can make these rules, but she's not allowed to invite anybody in. She's not allowed to have people over. She also has to stay in the apartment every night. There's a few other strange rules too. So it's like, she's like, okay, it's a little weird, but it's a private place. So she's like, okay, I'll do this. So she starts going there, and then some weird things start to happen in the apartment. Some people start to disappear. It starts to get creepy. And it's amazing. It's so good. I loved it so much. This is a great book. If you feel like you're in a reading slump, jump into a thriller, a fast-moving thriller. Highly recommend. It was so good, and I loved it. I like thrillers now. This is awesome. Okay, completely different spectrum. Let's go into middle grade. This is one I read, I think in November this year, so I read it recently and loved it. It's the third book in the Nevermore series. It's Hollowpox by Jessica Townsend. My goodness, you guys. I love this series. It's so awesome, and it's going to be 9 books, and this is only the third one. I'm so happy. So if you haven't heard of the Nevermore series before, we have found this girl named Morgan Crow. I do remember her name, mainly because her name's right on the cover. So Morgan Crow, she is born on the unluckiest day of the year. And because of this, not only is she blamed for everything that happens that's bad. Like if someone stubs their toe, they blame Morgan Crow for it. So she's always writing these apology letters to all the people all over her town because everyone blames for everything. But also, because of the fact she's born on this unlucky day, she's also destined to die on her 11th birthday. I think it's right. It's the 11th or 12th birthday. She's destined to die on her birthday. Like she knows she has an expiration date, basically, which is really depressing. So her birthday's coming up. She's expecting to die until Jupiter North, this crazy man, flocks in and brings her up and takes her to this magical place called Nevermore, where she goes and auditions to become a part of a magical school called the Wondrous Society. It's got some nice little Harry Potter vibes with the magical school thing, and just of a child who just is in horrible circumstances whisked away to join a magic school. So it's so much fun. It's very whimsical and amazing, and the story is wonderful. I love it. It's so heartwarming and cozy, and it's just great. This one was a little bit creepy because Jessica Townsend wrote this book about a pox. It's about a sickness, and it's very, very reminiscent of 2020, which was really creepy, but it was really, really good. It's very well done. Absolutely adored it. Handled some very heavy topics for middle grade, which was really cool to see, and just seeing a way to communicate that to kids in a unique way. So highly recommend it. So much fun. If you have not picked up that series yet, please do. All right, let's jump into some adult now. Back into adult. And I read Vicious by V.E. Schwab. And this one was a ride, you guys. This was a trip. So if you haven't heard about this one before, it's been out for a while. And it is a villain origin story. So if you like some morally gray characters to read about, but you still just root for them, this is the book for you. And also, if you're like a superhero fan and love reading about people with superpowers, this is one for you too. So in this story, we're following, you're gonna be so proud of me, Victor and Eli. I remember the names, which is amazing. So we're following Victor and Eli, and I think they're in grad school, and they decide to work on the same project, grad project, to where they are wanting to talk about EOs, which are extraordinaries. They are people that have developed powers, kind of think like superhero powers. So they're wanting to figure out how these people have developed those powers. And the way that they have, what they kind of figure out, is that all these people have had near-death experiences. Like they died for a few minutes and then came back. Like say they drowned and then someone, did some heart stuff to them, and then they coughed the water up and they were alive again. So think like that kind of thing, near-death experience type situation. So it deals with some dark stuff because they end up trying to commit suicide, but not really. They try to kill themselves, but then in a way that they're able to be brought back to life because they're trying to see if they can confirm their theory. And the thing is that they do. I promise I'm not spoiling. This is in the description of the book. But so we follow them at this time when they're studying it, and then flash forward to the future, they are no longer best friends, they are mortal enemies, and both of them have powers. And so we're just like following these two guys who hate each other so much. We don't fully know why. We're learning about that as we read, and they have these powers, and it's, like I said, it's very morally gray. Like every character is so morally gray, but at the same time you like root for the characters, and it's amazing and it's good, and it's so dark and so fun. So if you have not read V.E. Schwab before, I actually recommend maybe starting with this one. It's really, really good. I think this one stands well on its own too. It has a sequel, and I think there's actually a third book coming out as well. But I kind of like this one as a standalone. I think it ends just chef's kiss. It has a fantastic ending, and it's so good. Anyways, this is a good one. Highly recommend. Next one. This was actually the first book I read in 2020. So it has been an entire year since I've read this. So I don't fully remember everything about it, but The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. I read The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern in 2019, and I think it was my favorite book of 2019. I adored it so much. I was so excited to read this one. It had been a really long time since Night Circus had come out. Night Circus was her first and only book, and so she finally had this one. It is a book about books, so the book nerd in me was like, yes, please, sounds amazing. This has a very weird premise, so I'm going to try to explain it the best that I can. It's probably not going to make sense, so I apologize. We were following this guy who was in college, and he goes into his school's library, and he finds a book that has a title but no author. He starts reading it, and it seems like it's a collection of short stories. And one of the short stories he reads and realizes it's a memory from his childhood, and it shouldn't be one that anybody else knows about because he was by himself. And it's about him finding this door, basically a door that seemed like a magical door, and he didn't go through it. He wanted to, but he didn't, thinking, there's no way that could be a magical door, and he walked away from it. And he always wondered, what if he had actually tried to open it? So we've got that going on. So he reads that, and once he finds out, he becomes obsessed with this book he's found because somehow it has this story from his childhood in it. And from there, he just stumbles into this whole thing about the Starless Sea, which is this massive library underground. And that's all I can tell you because I don't know how else to explain it. To be perfectly honest, this book does not have much of a plot. If you're a character-driven person, it doesn't have that either because the characters are pretty bland and one-dimensional. The reason I really enjoyed this book is the writing style. Erin Morgenstern has the most atmospheric writing style I've ever read. And if you just don't try to focus too much on every detail that she gives you, just let the language wash over you, and it's like reading poetry. It's just so atmospheric, and I love it. So I can't pinpoint what exactly I love about this book other than just the atmosphere. I didn't really particularly love the plot. I didn't particularly, because there's not much of a plot. It's confusing as all get out, but I really enjoyed it. So that makes no sense, but you're welcome. So there's that one. All right, guys, I have 3 more books left. I realize I've been talking for a while. Let me get through these quickly. Thank you for still being here if you're here. This next one is definitely one of my favorites because it stuck with me and I've thought about it a lot, and that is The House of Salt and Sorrows by Erin A. Craig. This is a fairy tale retelling of a fairy tale that not many people have read or really have heard of much, and that is The 12 Dancing Princesses. But this is a very dark, creepy retelling, which I am all about. So we're following one of these 12 dancing sisters. We're following her, and she lives at this huge manor at this house by the sea. So it's got dark and stormy sea vibes, which so good. It's so good. The atmosphere in this book is amazing. So we have this girl and all of her sisters, except some bad things are happening to where her sisters keep dying off in horrible ways one by one. So far, they've all looked like accidents, but the girl we're following here, she's like, something's not right. I don't think this shouldn't be happening. Why are we getting knocked off? People in their nearby village think they're cursed. And so she starts to try to investigate and figure out what is happening to her sisters, and is she next? So it's a really dark, creepy mystery, and it's got like this seaside vibe, and it's almost always dark and stormy in this book, and it's just, I love it. I loved it so much. I will say I wasn't a huge fan of the ending. It kind of came out of left field for me, so that's the only thing I didn't like about this book, but the rest of it was so good, and I enjoyed it so much. I highly recommend. I would love to see some more retellings like this. I love a dark take on a retelling. Speaking of dark takes on a retelling, I also read Lost Boy by Christina Henry. This is a origin story for Captain Hook, and it is so good, you guys. So this goes with the take of basically, what if Hook isn't the villain and Peter Pan actually is the villain, because Hook used to be a lost boy. Are you interested yet? Yeah, I'm not going to tell you anymore. You're going to have to read it. It's so good. If you like Peter Pan and you like dark retellings, so good. I loved it. It was so awesome, and I was so excited to have a copy of it. I adore this book. So I highly recommend this one. I'm not going to go into it more than that because you just got to read it. It's so good and so fun, and it's great. I love it. Okay. One more nice dark book for you. This is my last book. Again, these are not in a particular order, so this last book is not necessarily my favorite of 2020. These are just all my favorites from the year, and that is The Haunted by Danielle Vega. This is to me, just a classic haunted house story, which makes me so happy. It's a short one, and it's a YA, and it's amazing. We're following this girl who has just moved to this small town. Her and her family have moved into this old house that they're renovating and fixing up to live in. And when she starts going to school, she ends up finding out that the house they moved into is kind of the infamous house in this town. It's the one where all the kids are afraid to go near or dare each other to go inside. A lot of bad things have happened in this house. Apparently, people have committed suicide in the house. People were murdered in the house. So it's got some weird stuff going on. And she's like, oh, great. Not only am I the new girl, but I've also moved into a house that's apparently just messed up. Until some real creepy stuff starts to go down in the house. And the house is truly haunted, and she has to deal with it and try to figure out what to do. And this book truly focuses on the haunting. That is the main focus. It is nonstop creepy, which I adore. I love reading creepy, haunted, ghosty books, but I love it when that's the main focus. It's not necessarily the characters, it's the focus of just the creep factor and having lots of scary moments. So I really enjoyed this a lot. There's 2 of these books out. The second one is just as good. It's called The Unleashed, and it's amazing as well and just as scary. So if you want some nice creepy vibes, especially if you're getting towards the fall and you really want a nice scary haunted story, I highly recommend this. Okay, so thank you for sticking around if you're still here. Those are all the books, all my favorite books from 2020. Let me know down below. If you did happen to kind of like rate your books, what was your absolute favorite book that you read from 2020? The one that you just want to scream from the hilltops how much you loved it. Let me know down below. Also, let me know if you've read any of the books I mentioned today. I would love to chat with you about them. That'd be so fun. On this side of the video over here is my logo. If you click on that, you can subscribe to my channel and follow me on my book journey. On this side of the video is a suggestion for another one if you want to watch another video right now. But thank you so much for watching. You rock, and don't forget to keep reading. Bye!